Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Ramsey, and I'm a senior fellow at the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center here at the Atlantic Council, where I lead our work focused on Venezuela for the center. We're all here today to shed light on an urgent situation: the ongoing wrongful detention of American citizens in Venezuela, as well as the needs of unjustly detained Americans who've been freed and are reinserting themselves into their lives. It's a crisis that's emblematic of broader human rights concerns in Venezuela today. And of course, as some of you know, on January 31st, U.S. Presidential Envoy Richard Grenell flew to Caracas for a special diplomatic mission. He negotiated the terms of a new migration agreement with Venezuela, laid out the objectives of U.S. policy to Venezuela under President Trump, and perhaps most importantly, successfully returned home with 6 Americans who'd been unjustly detained in the country. Ambassador Grenell's successful mission was a major diplomatic win for President Trump, underscoring this administration's commitment to securing the release of Americans abroad. Importantly, Ambassador Grenell's trip was also a clear demonstration of how to combine diplomatic pressure on Venezuela with constructive engagement in order to advance U.S. policy objectives, an approach which may hold lessons for policy moving forward. We celebrate the return, and we're lucky to have one of those who returned with Ambassador Grenell participating with us in today's discussion. But of course, we also need to remember that according to the US government, 9 Americans remain imprisoned among over 800 political prisoners in Venezuela today. As the Trump administration evaluates its next step in Venezuela, it's imperative that liberating these Americans and all political prisoners in Venezuela remains a central priority. Here at the Adrian Arsht Latin America Center, we continue to closely monitor and analyze the situation in Venezuela. Recently, we actually just published an analysis on the Atlantic Council website examining how the U.S. can balance its energy and migration interests while also pushing for a genuine democratic opening in the country. Additionally, our team maintains a continuously updated sanctions tracker, mapping individuals sanctioned by the U.S. and our allies with the aim of promoting more international coordination in the incentives presented to the Maduro government moving forward. I also invite you to stay tuned for an upcoming policy memo from our Venezuela Solutions Group, a diverse multi-stakeholder initiative that is working actively to help inform and fine-tune U.S. policy at this crucial moment. Of course, we do all of this, and we're here for today's discussion at a time when we know that President Trump is recalibrating the U.S. approach to the South American country, attempting to flesh out ways to advance U.S. interests. In these discussions, it's deeply important to remember the Americans who are still detained in Venezuela, as well as the needs of all those Americans who have been returned from Venezuela and need assistance in reintegrating to their lives back home. For this reason, we are absolutely delighted to have organized a discussion featuring 4 former American wrongful detainees in Venezuela, each of whom has undergone an unthinkable experience. No one should have gone through what they have had to endure, and we are so incredibly grateful to have them with us to share their stories today. Of course, we couldn't have thought of a better person to moderate today's discussion than Sarah Moriarty Levinson, whose courageous advocacy has raised global awareness about wrongful detainees and U.S. hostages abroad. Sarah is not only a dedicated advocate for the rights of Americans detained abroad, but also the daughter of Robert Levinson, the longest held American hostage in history, whose legacy inspired the Levinson Act. We, of course, want this to be an exchange. We want this to be a conversation, so please feel free to chime in with any questions for our panelists by going to askac.org, and Sarah will ask them directly of our panel. Again, that's askac.org, and I will leave it there. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us to start this conversation. I'm looking forward to a really engaging discussion.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm looking forward to one as well. I am joined by 4 wonderful men here today. So I'm going to start just by introducing each of them briefly, and then we'll go through some questions, and then we will go to that website that was mentioned, the askac.org. So first, the gentleman who roped me into the panel today, Matthew Heath. Matthew Heath is a former Marine and currently an intelligence analyst working in the private sector. He was wrongfully held in Venezuela for 25 months and provides training to individuals and organizations on how to mitigate threats. And then we have Osman Khan. Osman is a graduate of my alma mater as well, the University of Central Florida. He's a business owner, and he's also a former wrongful detainee in Venezuela. We have Eric Arthur, an entrepreneur, a thrill seeker, and a sailor who was wrongfully held by Venezuela and released in the recent diplomatic efforts by Rick Grenell and the Trump administration. And last but not least, we have Avon Hernandez. Avon has been a public defender for LA County for over 18 years. As a public defender, he has been a trial attorney, a trainer for new attorneys, as well as a member of the DNA unit. Avon received his BS in physics and mathematics in 2001 from UCLA, and he received his JD from UCLA Law School in 2005. He was unlawfully detained in Venezuela for almost 21 months. So thankful to have these gentlemen home with us. We're so happy to be able to have this really important conversation, especially as you mentioned that there are 9 Americans officially declared as wrongful detention cases, despite these recent diplomatic efforts, despite continued conversations to bring Americans home. We continue to see more Americans get taken in Venezuela. So I think it's a really timely and important conversation. In my advocacy, I've kind of been thinking about a bit of a framework around how there's so many different issues that we might face from a hostage policy perspective. And so there's something called the hostage policy continuum, and there's 5 pillars of it that we'll kind of go through today in different ways. So awareness, how do we bring Americans aware of the issue? Recovery, how do we bring people home? Support, how do we help the families going through this, as well as the returnees like these gentlemen when they do come home? Deterrence, and justice. So again, we're going to have a really great productive conversation. I think there's a lot of issues that we hope to get across today. If you have your own questions, one more plug for askac.org. We will be collecting those and making sure there's time at the end of the conversation. So Matthew, I'm going to put you in the hot seat first because I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here. Thanks to you today.
Oh, you're welcome,
Now
Sarah.
that you're Thank you, Matthew. So now that you're home, we're going to start with one of my favorite subjects right away, accountability. But what form of accountability do you hope to see for those who are responsible for wrongful detentions, especially in Venezuela? How do we get people home through accountability?
Well, if there isn't any accountability, we're going to continue to see wrongful detentions. We see with Venezuela time after time, the U.S. government brings hostages home, and then Venezuela continues to detain not just Americans but also Europeans. So if we don't have any form of accountability, we're going to continue to have this problem. Various forms of accountability are on the table. I would encourage the U.S. government to explore all their options. Personally, I do have a lawsuit against the president, President Maduro, not the recognized president. So personally, of course, I'd like to sue him for about $1 billion. More broadly speaking, for all detainees, if there aren't repercussions for these types of actions, we're going to continue to see them.
Thank you. And Osman, I'm going to you. I see you want to add something to that, so feel free to add to that, and then I can ask you a question as well.
Yes, I think what Matt is speaking about here is actually it's actually very true, and it's things that needs to be done. They have to understand there's consequences to their actions, and one of them is taking the legal avenue. People ex wrongful detainees taking legal action against their captors is a very big one that I think needs to be done more to de-incentivize these type of actions from taking place.
Yeah, I always think it's a form of justice for us, the many victims. But then it's also something that helps to stop it for the future, because the more that they feel those repercussions, the more that they think maybe I'm not going to get away with it next time.
Absolutely.
So actually, while I have you, from your perspective, how do you think the Maduro government specifically uses wrongful detention as a bargaining chip? What do you think they're hoping to get? What are things that, along with litigation, seizing assets, those kind of things, what are some of the things that we can do to stop this practice? Because it keeps going.
So, from my point of view, the Maduro regime has basically turned wrongful detention into a form of state-sponsored terrorism in a way. So, they're not acting like a real government. They're running a kidnapping ring, they're trading human lives for political and economic ransom. It's pure coercion dressed up as diplomacy. So, their message is simple. If you cross us, we're going to take your people and make you pay. The goals are clear. They want to weaken U.S. pressure, not even just U.S. pressure, international pressure. They want to break sanctions, force us into negotiations on their terms, and keep their dying regime alive by creating leverage. So it's brutal, it's cheap, and it works for them, unless we make it way too costly for them. So if we're serious about stopping this, we need to move past weak statements and half measures. We have to get creative. For example, we can treat wrongful detentions like international piracy. That way, we can freeze assets, issue global arrest warrants, and go after their families' luxury lifestyle overseas. Build a real international blacklist, not just for Maduro officials, but for any country playing hostage games. Kick them out of global banking systems and block their investments in the West. We also need to designate their security forces as a terrorist organization so we can legally hit anyone helping them no matter where they are. And then we can harden asylum and visa laws. So we make it clear to them that if you're tied to a regime that takes hostages, you and your family don't get to hide out in Miami or Madrid living the good life. If you're part of the system, you're locked out permanently.
Awesome. Sounds good to me. And I think one thing that you touched upon is state sponsor of terrorism, and something that is in legislation right now that we've been working on is the state sponsor of wrongful detention.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's an important step. So at the end of the day, Maduro's regime needs to know that every wrongful detention will cost them way more than they could ever hope to gain financially, diplomatically, and personally. So by designating them as a state-sponsored terrorism, we're doing that.
Awesome. Avon, your family was amazing in their advocacy. And I think it was no better chronicled than in the documentary recently released. How did your family and friends-led advocacy campaigns, do you think, move the needle in your case? And are there things that you think families can do differently, or that policymakers should be, oh my goodness, should be facilitating to amplify their impact as we go through this once again?
So when I returned home, I was able to kind of get a better idea of what my family and friends did for me while I was in detention. And honestly, what they did was amazing to me. What I feel that the government should do is basically what the Atlantic Council is doing right now. I mean, right, SPIHA, the State Department, have so many resources and connections to the government and media. They could be putting on, uh, you know, seminars or online content like this with family members of detainees talking about their detainees. They can put them in contact with the media for interviews. They can put them in contact with international human rights organizations and basically help, uh, have a checklist for the families for everything that they need to do to help put pressure on on all the governments that are involved. And so I think the government should be doing these types of things. And I think that not only that, but there's so much that, the hardest thing that you have to go through while you're in detention is everybody's always afraid of being forgotten about. And so that is the number one priority of the family for their loved ones, is to make sure that their name's constantly in the media, constantly on the news, and in the minds of lawmakers. And so, but who the best positioned entity to make that happen is the government. And so I feel like there should be an outline, a checklist for all families of everything that they need to do, along with SPIHA and all these other organizations working together in order to get everybody's stories out, uh, uh, to make sure that there's a sense of urgency on all actors, and to make sure that, you know, that words aren't just being, put out in the media where the government's doing everything possible and families don't get any responses. We don't know what's going on. And because the government works in cycles of 6 months to a year, every 6 months to a year, you'll find out some new information. But it's nothing that couldn't have been done or found out, you know, in the preceding time. So I just feel like there's a lot. It feels like all the pressure, all the responsibility is being put on the families who don't have the resources, who don't have the know-how, who need help. And it's a lot to ask. And I was in a very unique situation where I just had a lot of friends who were lawyers who figured it out. But I think it's unreasonable to expect family members to do the same.
And which organizations do you think inside the government did you find, or did your family find to be the most helpful, or where do we need to make improvements?
So once again, everybody in Spiha was amazing. Everybody. I mean, everybody cared. Everybody knew about me. Everybody knew my dad, my brother, all my friends. Everybody raved about them. But it's everybody outside, right? Everybody that's not charged with the task of trying to get detainees home. They have their different priorities, different duties. And so I feel like there should be an independent uh, entity within the government that fights for detainees, even if they have to fight other agencies of the government and push back against them in order to get us out. Because I feel like there's a lot of agencies that have other priorities other than getting hostages out. Because I'll be honest with you, if the US government truly cared about hostages, we wouldn't have people away for 15, 10, 7 years. That's, to me, that's inexcusable. There's no way you can tell me you care about hostage families and have somebody away 15, 12, 7 years. It's just incompatible.
So I think you make some of the points of the reason that the Levinson Act came into being and why we continue to try to build on the Levinson Act and improve on the Levinson Act. But I think there's always more work to be done. And I think that the behaviors have increased over the past several years. And I think we're only just seeing the Trump administration get started. So hopefully we'll continue to see them prioritize returns home, and more focus on the SPIHA office and the HRFC and the HRG.
And I apologize for anybody who doesn't know what SPIHA is. It's the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs. And I do want to say something about deterrence because, several people have mentioned their ideas for deterrence, but, deterrence is never going to work when our own government does the same thing. When we kidnap and disappear people and we, taunt them for doing so. And, you know, laws are supposed to be universal. They're supposed to apply to everybody. They're not supposed to be selective. And so if we continue playing games like we kidnap people and then we point the finger at somebody else who does the same thing and call them evil, and nothing happens to the people in this country when they do it, but we want to go all out against them, when they do it. I was very specifically told by the Venezuelan government that the reason I was kidnapped was because the US kidnapped Alex Saab. That's what I was told directly.
I
So I
I
think
think,
that if we're going to stop this practice, all the governments need to stop this practice.
yeah, I think it's a hard question, but I think that there's definitely a pattern we've seen in wrongful detentions around through countries that are consistently bad actors. And I think we need to continue to find ways to change that behavior for the future. Eric,
Yeah.
speaking a bit about the Trump administration, since your own experience with Rick Grinnell helping to bring you and five others home and without jeopardizing any sensitive details, were there aspects of the diplomatic engagement there or international pressure that you thought was really effective in helping to secure your release? Anything that you could share about that?
Yeah, my release was a complete surprise. My understanding is they were supposed to take 6 people out of a supermax. 2 of them refused to go. That's their stories. They needed 2 more Americans, and we were at the DGCIM, their headquarters in Caracas, and I'm just going to assume, because of what I looked at the map, we were on the way to the airport. So they needed 2 more Americans, and they, tapped me on the shoulder and told me to get up, handcuffed me, took a photograph, brought Sam. He was another American who was there about 8 hours before I was, say, placed in the Caracas, prison or detention center. So being released was the time I was petrified, scared. I thought it was over with. So that scared me. But I did not know I was going to be released. It was a complete surprise. It was a relief. It was an experience. I think I learned some stuff from it. It opened up my mind a little bit to other people. I don't want to do it again, and I'm glad I'm back in America.
We're glad you're back too. I think it brings up for me a subject that is really it's hard to watch, having been part of this for 18 years and seeing people get picked up and taken, picked up and taken. I think we've seen a lot of people come home from Venezuela. So Matthew, I'm kind of going to put you on the spot here, but how do we stop people going to Venezuela or going to Colombia and going over the border to Venezuela? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about from an awareness perspective?
Well, first of all, I'd like to encourage all the Americans receiving this message right now to not travel to Venezuela. Um, Furthermore, I'd like to encourage the State Department in Colombia to produce some sort of advisory that is more specific, that's more hands-on than just the travel advisory that's on their website. I've spoken to the State Department in Bogota, and I've encouraged them to produce a pamphlet that is handed out when Americans land in Colombia, that there's serious risks associated with as being an American citizen who travels to Venezuela, or just traveling near the border with the border area is, that's an increased risk also. So as far as the specificity for how to prevent people in Colombia, I wish I could speak to every one of them, but I don't know how to contact everybody. But everybody that sees this should know. And if you have a family member or a loved one who is traveling to Colombia, please just really encourage them not to travel to
Together clothes and
Venezuela.
outfits. I really didn't actually like fashion influencers either.
Uh-oh. I didn't like fashion influencers either. I think that's helpful, Matthew. And I think something that we've been talking about is the Countering Wrongful Detention Act of 2025 is something that Congress just reintroduced. There's some interesting ideas of how to work with third-party providers like airlines or Airbnbs, others that might help us to have some kind of button like, if you're going to this country, here's what you need to be aware of, or even just referring people to the State Department travel advisory, just bringing more of those examples up so that people have better awareness and understanding. Just a quick reminder, as I'm pivoting, that you can still submit your questions on askac.org if you have not done so yet. We did get one question, and let me just take a quick look at it, and then I'll figure out which one of you to ask it to. But okay. So how about Osman? Was your impression that the police or military who detained you were initially looking for a bribe, or is there likely an order from above to illegally detain Americans specifically?
In my case, it was definitely an order from above. Matthew was actually, so before I was captured, Matthew was already captured and being held under false pretenses right when I got in there. And they will also use that to extort your family. So once they grab you, in my situation, once they captured me and they held me under false pretenses, they also use that moment to also extort my family. So the DGCIM, the Dirección General contra Inteligencia Militar, it's their version of the CIA, their intelligence agency. Their intelligence agency then contacted my family, told them that I would only be released if they sent money. My family sent money, I was never released, and then that's where it ended up being more of a kangaroo court. I was taken to a courthouse where I was shown a map that I never had on me. I was shown some writings that they forced me to write, putting a gun to my head, and then after that, regular torture events occurred as well. So it's an order from above, but then while you're in the middle of this game, the people below are playing their own game as well.
Avon, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Well, in dictatorships, laws are meaningless and process is meaningless, and there's no there's no constitutional rights, no human rights, no due process, no anything. So everything is at the whims of the dictator, and all government agencies and laws are just instruments for, the dictator to get whatever he wants. So in these types of situations, it's very Machiavellian. Everybody's for themselves. Everybody that sees an opportunity to steal or to gain some personal benefit will do so whenever they can. And that's a situation that the government is like over there. I mean, it's basically the Wild West where, you can get away with what you can get away with on the frontier, but you always have to pay your royalties, your taxes, and if you don't, you'll get in trouble. But, the directives they always come from the same people because they control the whole country. And once again, there aren't any intervening independent agencies to check anything that's done over there. So, yeah, like Osman said, I mean, there's directives from the top. The middle people and the bottom people are always stealing and looting and pillaging whenever they can because that's how they survive.
So that must have been really hard to experience and then kind of shocking to come back to the US and have to reintegrate into American life. I'm curious, I'm going to start with you, Avon, but then I want to get Eric's perspective as well. Reintegrating into daily life in the US, what resources have been helpful, have been missing during that transition, and what can we do more to help during the reintegration process?
I think that the most important thing is financial help because, I'm lucky I had a lot of support and still do, but many people don't, right? So they have to go to work way before they're ready to go to work to sustain themselves financially, to find a place to stay. Just finding a job is really difficult. And, and all the psychological consequences of going through what we went through. So I feel like, at the minimum, people should be given at least a year or two with a stipend, kind of to recover, to get mental health help, and to not have to worry about how they're gonna find their next meal, how they're gonna make the next rent payment. And so the most difficult thing is, beyond all that, is trying to figure out your place in society when you get back home because it's changed. It's you're not the same and everybody else isn't the same, and so you have to find your new place in society and a new purpose.
Eric, anything to add to that?
Well, I was out of the country for 4 years. I bought a sailcat. It was my boat. And I cruised around the Mediterranean, crossed the Atlantic, and ended up in Venezuela. Losing your home, basically losing everything you have. They kept everything. I left with a pair of shorts and a t-shirt. Now they kept my undershorts. Yeah. So, yeah. When you get back, one, I was in a daze for weeks. Headaches, head whistles. I can understand what PTSD is now. Certain things do trigger me. Main thing, be calm. One thing, day by day. I'm also blessed. I have a lot of friends come stay with me, come stay with me. I'm probably on my fifth stay with another friend. Boulder, Colorado right now. I went here and I'm staying with a professor that I had back in '84. So it's been really nice. Everybody's been helpful, but yeah, I mean, I have to find a job, find some way to support myself and save up money to get rent, to pay for rent. So all that stuff is gone. You don't realize collecting items over the years, when it all disappears, how expensive it is to start working on a wardrobe again. So yeah, I agree. You need a year, maybe 2 years to get back. I talked to my neurologist. He says I'm not going to recover as fast as I think I'm going to recover mentally. It was fear. I stayed calm when I was there. Try to help everybody else stay calm. The worst thing to do is lose it there. They don't like it when you cry. They don't like it when you act out. They make it harder on you when you do that. So just be quiet. Don't say anything. Sit in the chair. now you're out. Yeah, I feel different. I feel like everybody else is different. I feel it's a little bit of a different country just because I was gone for a while, being detained. It was different kind of a challenge than I expected. So it's going to take time. I
Yeah.
mean, the other gentlemen
Right.
were way longer than I was as far as being detained, which I couldn't imagine, but I try to use the principle, I'm there a day, I could do another day. I'm there for 2 days, I could do 4 days. I'm here for a week, I could do another week. The time did start going faster for me by the third week. But the idea of getting out, there was hope, but I just didn't see it. There's no
Yeah.
communication with anybody. I was lucky. My friend Bart was tracking me on Vessel Finder. And after my boat disappeared for 2 days, he called some of my friends in the United States. They started looking for me. I was able to get one cell phone call out to a friend, Kathy. She was able to help me. But if I
Yeah.
didn't have anybody on Vessel Finder, and if I wasn't able to reach out to my friend Kathy, nobody would ever known I was in Venezuela. I'd still be there.
Yeah. And I've heard the reintegration and the mental health challenges or the physical challenges, and having access to someone to talk through some of those things has been challenging. And I know we've made some improvements in the Levinson Act that we continue to try to build upon. So I know that there's specific allowances for people to get access to mental health support. And I think one thing we continue to work on is how do we allow for a prepayment of that instead of you guys having to pay for it when you come home, when you've just gone through all of this and then have to get reimbursed. So that's something that I keep pushing in my conversations, is how do we help to ensure that that happens as quickly as possible so you know about it and get access to it, and then you don't have to worry about the burden of that, and we find a way to make it better.
Sarah, could I hop in here for a second?
Yes, I have a question for you too, Matthew.
Well, I just
Go ahead.
very briefly, the mental health treatment is obviously a gap right now that the U.S. government could improve upon. I just want to give a quick shout out. There are a couple of NGOs. Hostage US is an amazing organization. They're doing what the government really should be doing right now, and they provide one of the services that they provide is they provide support to wrongful detainees when they come home. Pro bono, mental health services, a ton of different things. They're an amazing organization. I just wanted to
Yeah.
shout them out right here. Please can give me
That's
my
great.
question.
They are amazing. I agree. So I'm going to ask you a question that just has come in a couple minutes ago from askac.org. I feel like I'm doing an advertisement for it every time I say it. And there's still time to ask your questions. So Matthew, I think I'm going to put this one to you. There's still many political prisoners and wrongful detainees in Venezuela, including those of other nationalities. I think hundreds, I think Jeff said, in many different countries or from many different countries. How can the international community coordinate to protect their citizens while deterring Venezuela from repressing their own citizens?
Well, that's a really tough question to answer because we do see treaties that are supranational, so that different countries can agree on courses of action. I guess really we'd have to see something like an international Levinson Act, but maybe something that would be a little bit easier than a treaty or an international Levinson Act. Something that we could do more quickly is sanctions. So economic sanctions are we see this with U.S. policy, for example, against Russia, Iran, China, not just our competitors, but we see coordinated action with across the entire West, the United States, Canada, Europe. That's where most of the money is right now. That's where the big markets are. So I think the fastest way to work on prevention is economic sanctions that are coordinated across as many governments as we could get on to agree.
Sounds good to me. I'm all for a global Levinson Act and more sanctions. I've often said, I remember when we were trying to get Levinson Act sanctions in place against Iran, there was a comment of, oh, we're already doing sanctions in this one area. And I think the more we amplify it and call out the wrongful detention behavior with sanctions, the more we affect changes in that specific behavior. So I'm all for piling on as many sanctions as we want to add. Osman, I haven't asked you a question in a while, so I'm going to come back to you. I have heard that you and Avon had formed a really close relationship while you were being held, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about how that developed and how the community of returnees continue to support each other. I know a lot of us are gathered in DC this week, so hopefully I'll see you guys this week. But tell us a little bit more about that community and that friendship.
Absolutely. So while I was being held, Avon's actual prison cell was right across mine. And funny enough, Matthew's cell was actually right across as well. It wasn't too far away from both of our cells. So being so close physically made it easier for us to communicate, build trust, especially in an environment where trust was really rare. I went through a lot during captivity, including seizures brought on by the torture I endured. And Avon was one of the first to step in and help me during those moments. Also, Matthew. Both their presence and their willingness to help, and just knowing someone cared for me during such a difficult ordeal in my life was so special. That's why it really become a brotherhood. And Matthew touched on some of the things that some of the organizations that help us when we come back. The Foley Foundation is another big one. I mean, I think the NGOs are really doing a great job in terms of helping us where the government can't currently. They're really fitting in that role. So the Foley Foundation, Hostage US, and there are a couple others that
I'll add.
yeah, I'll let
I'll
you add
add
one there.
Yeah, the McCain Institute. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Jesus Armas, who's a McCain global leader, that I know the Freedom for Political Prisoners Initiative is advocating for his release, along with all of the political prisoners in Venezuela. But yeah, I fully agree. Foley, McCain, I think there's Global Reach. We're missing some Hostage US. There's a lot of great NGOs that have formed over the years.
And the community of hostages when I came back. So, for example, when I got back, Trevor Reed reached out to me. He was held captive in Russia. When I got back, a few other ex hostages, and from other countries. So the community is extremely helpful. They guided me on on their recovery process and some of the tips they learned along the way as well. So it becomes a brotherhood. It becomes a family.
So I think talking about this week, there are a lot of families whose loved ones are currently being held in Venezuela. I think if any of you, I could open it up, maybe I'll go to Avon first, but if you have any advice, practical strategies to help these families who have loved ones detained right now, what would your advice to them be? Because I think
So,
they are listening.
right. So, all my advice comes from what my friends and family told me their struggles were while I was in. And the number one thing is keeping your loved one's name, their story in the media, right? To continually come out on the news, continually doing interviews, whether it be print or video, and just I was lucky. I had a lot of people helping, but they made inroads with so many different politicians. They called politicians that were not in California that they were able to convince to support me. And so, they didn't just look at, my representative in California in my district, but they went all over. They went to Texas, they went to Maryland, they went to different states to see if they could garner support from other people, which they did. And I think that's something that most people don't ever think about doing. And there was a large group of members of Congress who supported me. So it would be difficult for me to believe that those same members of Congress wouldn't support each and every one of the families who currently have loved ones detained in Venezuela. So I think just calling everybody, if they were to go online and do an internet search for members of Congress that's either supported me, Osman, Matthew, or any of the other American hostages previously detained, I feel like they can call any single one of them and ask for their support and get as many people on board as possible, and constantly trying to do interviews and being on TV, on the internet, in the media all the time, just constantly hammering away the urgency that's needed in order to get their loved ones out of Venezuela.
Great. I agree. And there's a hostage task force, a hostage and wrongful detainee task force on the House side, led by Haley Stevens and French Hill. And they're a really good place to start too, because they can get you connected to the right places. Matthew, anything to add there?
Well, if I was going to give a message to the families and possibly the detainees that are being held right now, I remember I was detained for the first 10 months in isolation. I wasn't allowed phone calls or any visitation from an embassy staff or lawyers, and I remember how difficult it was. But even at the prison, some of the other prisoners, I remember we had one radio. One of the guys there had a radio, and we did get a little bit of news. So if through some miracle, this message reaches those guys, I would say, don't give up hope. There is zero chance that the U.S. government is going to forget about you, and there is an army of people. There are thousands of men and women across the entire government, and their job is to get you home. And you're not going to hear about 99% of it, but that doesn't matter. This is an ordeal that is very difficult. It's absolutely survivable. Uh, just keep the faith, and the U.S. government is gonna try to get you out.
And Osman, I'm going to go to you. And then Eric, I have a different question for you that I'm going to come back to you for. But Osman, anything to add?
Yeah, similar to what Matthew's saying, it makes me think about so this was actually probably, at the moment, it was a difficult thing to hear, but it was something I'm happy I did hear. Ambassador Roger Carson, he was the ex-special presidential envoy for hostage affair. He worked under, the Biden administration and the first, Trump administration. He told me when I first saw him, he was like, Osman, I don't know when you're gonna get out of here, but when you get out, make sure you're the best version of yourself you can be. This is not the end for all the hostages that are there. This is not the end. Once you get out, I mean all of them. I mean if you've endured so much, you have so much you can achieve just just based off of what you've endured. And I remember he also told me embrace the suck. So even in your most difficult situations, by embracing the suck, I mean you're teaching yourself so much that the majority of people will never get to discover about themselves.
Awesome. Eric, anything to add there?
I would say it's keeping the faith, believing that somebody will come get you, even though you don't know anybody is coming to get you. It's just, for me, it was being positive every day, and no matter how bad it was, just be positive.
Yeah. I just am astonished that there's 9 Americans right now. And I think at our peak with Iran, we had 6 Americans held. 9 is unfathomable. And there's probably even more than that, that are not yet declared as wrongfully detained. One thing that I think has been an important symbol when people return home, but also a symbol for our own government of wins and losses or successes and failures, is right behind Osman on the screen, the hostage and wrongful detainees flag. And Eric, I just wanted to ask you, you had shared a interesting or a nice emotional story about when you received the flag and what you plan to do with it. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, it was touching. For me, because it was a short period of time, it was just one thing after another, after another, after another, and it was just hard to take in everything that was happening. And when you land back in America, it kind of dawns on you well, at least for me, what happened. The State Department sent out a psychologist that I sit and I talked to, and he said, you're a member, and they gave me the flag, and the flag was meant a lot because there's just not really a lot of them around. I was told that there's only 3 flags that are allowed to fly over the Capitol, and that's the American flag, the POW flag, and the detainee flag. And that meant a lot because I love my country. My friend Kathy and Jackie worked really, really, really hard to get me out. I want to say, as being a detainee, that was just a portion of my life. I don't want that to be my life. I don't see myself putting the flag up at my house, but Jackie, her husband, has a restaurant, Tavern 101, off Agura. So the gentleman that's from LA probably knows where Agura is. And when we had the fires in LA about 5 years ago, he was feeding 100 firemen at a time, and they gave him a fraternal order of fireman's flag. So for Jackie's birthday's on the 10th of next month. So I'm going to give her the flag to give to Marcos to put it in his tavern, basically to thank them for all the effort and how hard they worked to get me out. And if it wasn't for my friends, I'd still be there.
That's awesome. One day I'll try to visit there so I can see it.
Okay.
I think one theme that has come up a lot is relevant to a question that was submitted online. So it seems like all of you were released as a result of diplomatic engagement between the US government and Maduro. What do you make of the value of these back channel communications, which occurred under Biden and have continued under Trump? Matthew, I think I'm going to start with you on that one.
Okay, so, well, first of all, I don't want to take away from the 9 Americans that are currently held in Venezuela. It's absolutely critical. It should be a huge #1 priority. But we also need to be thinking about the 9 Americans that haven't been detained yet, the next 9 Americans, because we could get these 9 Americans home today. Venezuela they're not going to stop. They have been doing this for years where they just continue to detain Americans to use them as chips. So, that's really one of the things that I'd like to encourage policymakers is, as big of a priority getting Americans home, we've got to start using a whole of government approach to doing some sort of prevention.
Osman, anything to add on that one?
Uh,
From a back channel diplomatic efforts perspective.
I think communication is always good. I don't see this issue being publicly litigated. As much as I would love for more transparency to be done into these negotiations, I understand that both parties don't always want that, right? Like, I understand Maduro is not going to want to expose his criminal regime in a public way. So I think we need to keep these private back channels open. But I also think that the families need to push hard and make sure their loved ones are out there in public. I remember when I was first being held hostage, I was told the Venezuelan government physically told me to tell my family to make sure none of the news about my torture, none of the news about how I was detained got out there. And I told my family that out of fear. I tried keeping my case private. A lot of times when we're being held captive, we can't make the right decisions. And without public awareness, it is hard for anyone to advocate for us. So I would tell the families, if there's anybody watching, put as much pressure as you can in terms of making sure your loved one or whoever you care about is being kept in the public limelight. Because I mean, from what we've noticed, the more publicity a case gets, the more NGOs will get involved, the more the government will get involved in your case as well.
I agree. The squeaky wheel gets the grease in these situations, it seems. Anybody want to add anything to that?
I think that as far as the back channels go, I think it's one of those things that's essential, right? If we don't have back channels to talk to the captors of U.S. citizens, then we're never going to get them out. I mean, if you truly say that, American hostages are a priority and we're going to do everything we can to get them out, then there has to be that line of communication open at all times in order for things to happen. If that doesn't exist, people don't get out. I currently don't know if there's a back channel or not. Uh, I don't believe there have been any further visits to Venezuela from the Trump administration. And so, this once again, governments seem to work in cycles of 6 months to a year. That's a long time for a hostage. The while we were in there, and I think I can speak for every single hostage, is all you care about, all you want, all you wish for is for the US government to get along with whoever's holding you, no matter how horrible they are, no matter how horribly they've mistreated you or everyone else. All you want is for them to get along and talk so that you can get out. And without that, it's impossible. So it's essential. And, I don't have any, I hope back channels are open right now and there's communication and that there are at least active negotiations for trying to get people out. Because if that doesn't exist, then who knows when people will get out.
I hope so. I do think that President Trump really appreciates the opportunity to bring Americans home from captivity overseas. So hopefully we'll continue to see that.
Sarah,
And
I
go
don't
ahead,
think
Adam. Yep.
I don't think the problem is lack of communication between the United States and Venezuela. I think that various officials at the U.S. State Department, SPIHA, the Secretary of State, various officials at the National Security Council, anybody, if we need to talk to Venezuela, we've got their phone number. That's not the bottleneck on these trades.
So I think we're running a little bit low on time. We only have a few minutes left. I think one for the audience that's not directly involved in this, who might have stumbled upon this or is just interested in the issue, what are things that everyday Americans can be doing, care about this issue, even if they're not directly affected, to support efforts to bring wrongful detainees home? Are there things that people across the country might be thinking about? Eric, I'll start with you because you had a lot of grassroots support.
I'm going to say the first thing in my case was the government wouldn't even admit that I was there. Maduro's government didn't even admit that I was there. Even Maduro wanted me to do a video praising him, and I refused to do it. Nobody knew I was there. People just assumed. One, because of the vessel finder, and two, because I made a phone call saying I was in Margarita, get me, out of here. But beyond that, the people that were trying to help get me out, nobody said I was there. I had one friend now tell his son, he goes, I think Eric's dead. He's been gone for over 2 weeks. And the boat's name is Tambo. And Sam goes, you can't kill Tambo. And I called Grant about 2 weeks later, and I go, I'm out. I can't believe it. And so I had friends who wrote me off as just being dead and that I wasn't going to come back because nobody was admitting on either side that I was there.
Yeah. I think there's also some actions that people can take, like calling Congress or asking, kind of watching, I think of Take No Prisoners, the documentary, calling to get that in their local theater. Or are there things like that people, to bring broader awareness of the issue, might be doing? Not specific to a person necessarily, but Osman, maybe, is there anything that comes to mind that you think an everyday American might try to do to help?
Yes, whenever you see a case of a wrongful detainee, share their story on Facebook, share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter. There's a lot of great NGOs as well that you can share on your Facebook page. Donate there. The Foley Foundation, the Richardson Center. I know Mickey Bergman it has his own thing he's doing as well right now. There's a lot of great
Global
NGOs that
reach.
we can donate to and we can share and that way with the word keeps spreading.
That's a great suggestion. How about you, Matthew? Anything come to
Yeah,
mind?
absolutely. Well, besides supporting all the NGOs that provide support, advocacy to wrongful detainees and their families, some amazing organizations we've already went over. Global Reach, Mickey Bergman at Global Reach, formerly of the Richardson Center. He is an amazing person. He did incredible work at the Richardson Center. Now he's at Global Reach. These kinds of organizations, it takes donations to help out with those kinds of organizations. Also, I'd like to call out P3 Media, the producers, the production company for Take No Prisoners. They did a documentary on this topic, and they're an amazing organization. I think they really explained in 90 minutes what it is to be a hostage for a couple of years. And when that comes out, whether it's on Netflix or Hulu, I'd encourage everybody to take a watch.
Yeah, hopefully there's a bidding war and then the money goes to the returnees. Um, Wishful thinking, I know. Avon, one last thought, and then I think we got to wrap up. Anything to add from an everyday American's perspective?
You know, I think a lot about what my family and friends did for me. You know, it truly takes a village to get somebody out. There's so many people that have to be involved, not just in the government sector, but with family and friends and community. And so, for all the families that have loved ones in Venezuela, uh, I would advise them not to do that by themselves, to look for help, whether it's other family and friends or people from work or obviously people from the government, because you're going to need a group of people to help you because there's something to do every day. There's calls to make every day. There's emails to write every day, and there's interviews to do. And sometimes you gotta harass people and make sure they don't forget about you, so they don't forget about your loved ones. And so I feel like building that community is essential in order to get out your loved ones, and that's a process in itself. But once you have that, you have a solid support base, which can guide you through the process and give you the hope and the energy and the I guess the power to endure everything you're going to need to go through in order to get out your loved ones. So uh, that's my
Yeah.
advice to them is don't do it by yourself. Get as much support as you can, and don't stop ever because you're the only ones that can get your loved ones out. You're the only ones.
Thanks, Aiden. And I think with that, we have to wrap up, but I appreciate all of your insights. We're so thankful that all of you are home. We look forward to the next panel that hopefully brings the 9 Americans who are currently there home to welcome them sometime soon, I hope. But I think if I could leave with one thought as to what the everyday American can do, call Congress, ask them to pass legislation that helps returnees and helps stop this practice for the future. And so thank you again to the Atlantic Council. Thank you to all 4 of you gentlemen. Thanks for this opportunity, and let's work to continue bringing everybody home.
Thank you.